Hey, I'm Chris. It's my YouTube channel, philosophy, art, etc. etc. I thought I'd do another video just talking about AI art generators, like image diffusion, film, blah 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 blah, Mid Journey. I guess ChatGPT though I've not explored it as much as Mid Journey. Just basically talk about my own cognitive dissonance on this subject, some of my own thoughts, sort of bleak visions as well as like optimistic, a bit of pessimistic. What will be the ramifications of this technology in the negative and the positive that I see potentially happening in the future. Obviously, I'm not Nostradamus, I can't predict the future, but just some thoughts on where it could go, I suppose. My general approach to this technology being developed is, well, it's here. What can we do about it? You either work with it or you become a Luddite, which is, realistically isn't going to work anyway. Completely rejecting the technology isn't going to make it go away. I know there are legal efforts I think there are some ongoing legal actions being taken by artists. I'm not really up to date with all that, but I sort of think that's probably a bit pointless. What's the point of? I don't know. I guess if there are cases where there's clearly been not even copying, but even just pure profiting off somebody's work without any permission or copyright violation, in a serious level, then I can understand why that might be important. Again, I'm not looked into all that side of it, so. But in general, I think, the technology's here. It's only going to get better quite rapidly. But like I said, I've had quite a lot of cognitive dissonance on the whole issue. At times I think, yes, this is amazing. We're moving into a new epoch of collaborative creativity between machines and human beings. And then in other moments I feel like, well, that's it then. We've taken one of the main things that made human beings, which is creativity and a capacity for original thought and image making, and just basically outsourced it to machines or algorithms, or basically just it's removed. It's sort of got rid of the need for human beings to strive for newness or novelty, which when I feel more pessimistic about it, I think it's just going to make people lazy. Companies, organizations that want artwork are just going to go straight to these image generators instead of going to artists who might be able to produce something that's more original or authentic, right? So, like I said, I jump around a lot with how I feel about these AI generators. Obviously, for mass production of art, it's going to have a huge effect on designers and illustrators. I think it's going to the real, in terms of jobs, the people it's going to affect the most are, I think, illustrators and graphic designers and things. Obviously, those sort of jobs might not even exist for human beings, I think, in the next 5 years or whatever, because the AI will have, will potentially anyway, will have supplanted that need, which is pretty serious. There's a lot of people who are graphic designers and illustrators, a lot of very talented people who do that sort of work as well, not even just in the comic book industry, in the commercial industry and everything else. And on a certain level, I do feel for those people. I've never, worked in that industry. I'm a fine artist, really. I'm a painter. It's never something I've expected to make money from. So, personally speaking, that's part of the reason why I'm in terms of my own personal work, I'm not that bothered. I'm a fine art painter. It's not. Actually, it's one of my paintings there. I don't have to make money from selling paintings. It's just I've never had that expectation, and I've sold paintings, but it's never been my primary source of income. So, but I could imagine, if I was a illustrator or somebody who's a graphic designer, That, and then my entire income just gets taken away potentially, or my the amount of clients that you can have access to drops significantly, then I would be quite worried. Yeah. But then even in terms of like what I do for work, which is pretty much my main, whatever I have work, the main source of income I've ever got any money from is doing programming, right? That's under threat because these artificial intelligence can write code now. There's been GitHub Copilot for quite a long time, but I think ChatGPT. I've not really looked into ChatGPT that much, but I think it can, write code. So I might be out of a job soon. And that's been considered a skilled work for a long time. Same as with writing articles and. I think the real risk of this technology, there are aspects of it which are amazing, of course, but the risk with it is that it makes human beings creatively lazy. I think that's probably the main risk of it. And instead of using this technology to create something new, I think the risk is that it just becomes a big, sort of vortex of the same content getting reharvested and regenerated again and again and again, almost like an infinite spiral. It just keeps, the neural network just keeps on generating the same style, the same imagery, the same again and again and again, and nothing new comes out of that. It feels like, especially even when you're talking about the ChatGPT, can generate articles you ask it to write an article about. There's already a lot of worry about how it's just going to affect people, marking essays in universities, because people can just get ChatGPT to write their essay for them quite convincingly, fairly convincingly. That basically just eliminates quite a lot of ways that universities or educational institutions can assess if actual learning is taking place, because you can just get a machine to do it now. I guess this has been a trend in culture for the last 20 years. There's just basically even for myself, I'm a millennial. I've grown up with the internet and search engines. That's something I've grown up with, and I think probably we're just moving into the next stage of that. Being able to retrieve information, whereas now it's probably more like creating information. It's more creative, right? So the major paradigm of the generation that I grew up as a millennial, born in 86, blah, blah, blah. The major innovation in terms of the internet and information sharing was search engines, really. So indexing of information, fast retrieval of information from within, the internet, World Wide Web, blah, blah, blah. Now, I think probably what we're witnessing is the next evolutionary step of that. Because obviously we're still going to have search engines, but now we're going to have an actual information structure and data that can generate novelty on the fly with the neural networks and everything else. So I don't know what effect that's exactly going to have upon. My hope is that we, as human beings, as creative individuals, can find a way to collaborate and use these tools in a creative way. I've already started experimenting a bit with game design and using it as a way of creating narratives by generating imagery and then having that inform the narrative as a build an interactive fiction game. But obviously there will be, like I said before, there will be the effect that I think a lot of companies will just use it for generating imagery and cut costs, basically. And you can't exactly blame them, to be fair, in a lot of ways. At the end of the day, companies exist. Yeah, they exist to make products, but they exist to make profit, right? And if they don't have to pay someone to... I'm not justifying it, but basically it does make sense on a monetary level that if you can get something generated for free, or for a small expense rather than paying someone a full-time wage, then just on a purely empirical level, that makes sense for, you're gonna create less expense for a company, and therefore they have more chance when they actually sell the stuff of making profit, turning over a profit. But capitalism is a cruel, unfeeling framework of economic system, right? But that's the world we live in, and that's, the bottom line of any of capitalism is profit, and that's not going to change unless we have unless we had some sort of I don't know, world Trotskyist revolution. What's the chances of that happening? Very minute. Like we're not. There's no way. I mean, there is like you could say there's probably a little bit of a, like leftism and interesting alternatives to capitalism. It has had a bit of a resurgence in popularity in the last 10 or 15 years, but it's still, it's marginal. And, that sort of political ideology has a lot of flaws in it, especially something like Trotskyism. I mean, Trotsky was an interesting figure of the Russian Revolution, but also extremely flawed. And he's not a model to look up to for 21st century leftism. Like Trotsky. Like, oh right, yeah. I mean, okay, like he was a man who existed in a difficult time, but his sort of idea of international communism is inherently idealistic and just. Again, would actually. Okay, I don't know why I'm going on to this. Anyway, like, basically, we exist in capitalism. That is the economic system that we live under. Artificial intelligence will just develop according to the rules of that system that we live under, which is obviously competitive, and it would arguably drive progress because we live in a competitive capitalist system. Because every company is going to want to develop a better AI engine than the other. I did actually read the other day that Google are quite worried about, and Google just had a ton of layoffs as well. Actually, it's been a massive, like a ton of layoffs from Google. So Google are, I think, a bit afraid that this is going to basically the sort of paradigm of the neural networks and artificial intelligence is going to replace, in some respect, or going to be supersede the the sort of Google search engine paradigm which we've existed in for 15, 20 years, I guess, on the internet. And we probably are transitioning into a new age, basically. Will be interesting, I think. Obviously, there's potential net benefits and, negatives, I think, from this development, as of any development. Like I said, I think there will be some creative potential. I mean, what? Let's just think about some amazing things that could happen with this. Like about generative music, for example. Like there are already AI systems that can, sort of generatively produce music. I foresee maybe in the next near future, and people are probably already doing it, that you could have human composers working in tandem with machines to, that opens up a lot of potential for musical composition, live performance, where you actually have artificial intelligence and human beings collaborating, composing music in real time with the generative aspect, and then human beings somehow responding to that. That is a cool prospect. In terms of the visual arts, I've already started doing this myself. Like just generate artworks as a starting point for actual paintings, so you generate artworks on Midjourney, and it helps feed your ideas to actual paintings or digital artworks or whatever. Or you could just use. I have a friend who I think is already investigating, using Midjourney a lot to just explore different ideas, and then I'm sure he'll be able to, then translate those into further digital artworks if he so wishes. But also it helps just provides it's a good place for experimentation, basically, of visual ideas. I guess you could probably use it for architecture ideas as well. In terms of generating ideas, yeah, it's good. Obviously, the negative is that so we're going to have a lot of skilled people who are very skilled at doing illustration and doing branding and doing all this sort of design or digital art, who are concept art as well for games. Now, I think concept art for games is slightly different because, if you've seen how Midjourney does hands in a minute, I think the concept artists in games will still be safe for quite a while because, for a few years at least, because, if you know digital concept artists who do game artwork for games, they're incredibly skilled artists. And often, if you're working in a AAA industry, obviously they're going to want a very bespoke, sort of specific style, which I'm not so sure that like something like Midjourney would be able to do to the required standard. But I imagine probably concept artists will use those tools a bit for idea generation and then do their own, individual work after that. I don't think they're going to be so much for it, but maybe in the future. I don't know. Like there is already like artificial intelligence that can create 3D imagery as well. So like 3D models, there already is. There's already one that can generate 3D models. So again, that's another area because 3D modeling is tough. Like I've obviously I've dabbled in game design and game dev before. 3D modeling is just like it's a specialist thing. It's a niche thing. Like people who are good at it have to train to be good at it for a lot of time as they're learning the software. But yeah, again, like there's another area which might get it's early days, but I've actually seen software that can generate 3D models. So it's like I don't know. I mean, maybe it's going to become more like maybe the entire work industry will become more focused on learning how to train these models or give these specific prompts. But again, like I'm not so convinced that like full web apps can be generated on the fly with this technology yet, because I mean, I know to a degree that they can generate a website or web application. I know that they can do that, but actually being able to, so like say if you're generating let's go on to this for one, not very quickly. Maybe we're going to create a web application, I don't know, like a CRUD app or something, like a data visualization and collection application for, I don't know, information on the weather, right? So that would probably be, you could probably create something simple, I guess, like generate something simple that, you grab this data from this data set via an API, and then just basically convert that into a bunch of charts. You could probably generate something like that with AI, I guess. But then what if you had, and again, like you could, I guess as the basic, you could move to a system where there's like a template for every sort of type of website, and then generate something. But there's usually different specifications that come into any application or website or service, which just aren't within the initial scoping, or you can't fit into strictly defined templates. And that sort of novelty and newness in terms of web application design comes from usually thinking outside of those sort of take for example Twitter, right? Twitter was an example of something new. There was no prior existing template for that, that as a service, a messaging service where you're limited to characters, you can follow other people, basically you have that feed of there was I mean, Facebook was similar, right? But there was a difference in the way that was set up. It wasn't just, you couldn't just say, this is a template of what Twitter is. You'd have to create your own template for it. I don't know where I'm going off with that, but yeah. Anyway, I guess like the whole language has always been the expression of, it's been in the what am I saying? I'm losing my train of thought a bit now, but it's always been in the expression of language that sort of anything has, basically been expressed, I guess. I've lost my train of thought now. I think I'll leave this ramble here. I've barely stopped talking now, just let the stream of consciousness flow. Ultimately, I think we're just at a juncture point in history, technologically, culturally, and I think AI will play a large part in that, in how we develop forward as a culture. I think we're probably moving into the next phase of the information age, right? The first phase of the information age is over, I think, which was, Google, search engines, mass proliferation of the internet, social media, yada, yada. Now I think we're just moving into the next phase of whatever that's going to be, the the information age. I think we're just moving into the next part of it. I think there will be many net positives and many net negatives. The one thing I hope above all things is that we don't emerge into a society of extreme control, though I'm worried that we might have already gone past the point of no return for that one. I do think we will probably be emerging into a more of a surveillance society. I think that is probably going to happen. I mean, it already is happening, you know, in a lot of respects. We're moving into the big data, I think. Surveillance society, who knows the nefarious ways that AI will factor into that, probably many. So I'm not entirely pessimistic about the future, but in terms of how these technologies are going to be used by governments and deep state and everything, I'm not going to hold out that they're going to be used in any positive way. I think it would just be just the usual crap in that respect. I'll probably leave this video here. I'll just basically just a rambling bunch of thoughts, but yeah. What do you think anyway? How do you think this technology is going to be used? Do you think it's going to be positive, negative? What do you reckon? I don't know. Like I said, this is just a stream of consciousness. I don't know if not really fully formed ideas, just a few morning coffee thoughts, basically. No.